Now, the last example I want to talk about is National Australia Bank in Melbourne, and how the program helped them create a more agile governance system. What happened, as I said, is that the bank was fairly traditional. It had been very successful at the time of the economic crisis in the early 80s, and it had built on that. But now it realized that it needed to become more agile to be able to compete. And so I was one of many consultants that was called at the time. My role was to help them migrate from a more traditional siloed organization to a project-based organization. So I was going to look at governance systems, portfolio management, and program management. They were already doing project management. They were doing it quite well. And one of the first questions I asked is, well, what percentage of your budget goes in project management versus business as usual? And they said, a lot. I said, okay, how much is a lot? They said, well, a lot. I said, well, could you come up with numbers? So they came back a few days later and they said, we have 620 projects. And I said, okay, what's the size of those projects? And they said, well, we don't know, not really sure. Okay, so we went to see that, and out of these 620 projects, maybe 8 were major projects. The rest were small initiatives that were happening at a continuous improvement, things like that. So they had a lot of projects, but when it came to it, 25% of their budget was invested in projects. 5% of their budget was invested in security, and 70% of their budget was invested in business as usual. I said, okay, what's the definition of agile? Agile is the capability to react to emergent situations, situations that could not be planned. Okay? Now, in order to react in the right way, you have to be prepared, right? I mean, you can have the knee-jerk reaction and just kick, but you don't know what you're kicking. It may be a hornet's nest, and then you have to run very quickly to escape them. So if you don't if you don't have a good knowledge of your context, your environment, your domain, if you don't have data to help you react, you can be agile. You're just going to be running around like a chicken without a head. Agile is not that. Agile is the capacity to react in the best possible way to emergent situations. And in order to do that, you have to have good measures, good data. You have to be well prepared. You have to have multiple options. You have to have a good decision management process made of 2 things. What do you do when you make a decision? The first thing you have to do is learn. Try to understand the situation. Try to make sense of the situation. Try to see what are the different potential alternatives. And only then can you make a decision based on those alternatives, based on what's the highest, the alternative that has the highest feasibility, that will bring us the most benefits for the investment. That's what Agile is really about. So in order to become Agile, they needed projects. They needed to look at different ways of making things different. Continuing of doing exactly what they did before, investing 70% of their budget in business as usual, was not the right solution. So we started looking at how can we increase the percentage of money you invest in new things, in innovative development, but in a sensible way. Okay? And that's what we tried to do. And when we developed this program, we looked at portfolio management, we looked at governance system. And for example, in the governance, at the moment, the leadership team, there were 8 people in the leadership team. So the managing director plus her team of the people that were considered the leaders in the different departments of the technology and operations were meeting every week. So every week they were meeting. So because there was a concept of engagement were quite popular at that time. To engage people, they met in the different sites, like CERN was doing. You know, we were going to meet once here in Melbourne, once in this city, and once in this other city, and they met around and all that. Okay, but they met behind closed doors. And the first meetings I attended, everybody was there and all that, and because it had just started, these meetings, and they had each head of department had their consultants, and so there were about 20 people in the room, and we had lunch and all that, and discussed a number of things. And I would say 80% of what was discussed was of no interest to somebody. It was a different 80%, but you only had about 20% of the meeting which was interesting for you as an individual. So what happened? The first one who found an excuse was the head of security. He said, "Oh, I have an important security matter. I can't attend the next meeting. Sorry, guys. You'll have to do without me." And he was not there. And then the week after, it was the head of operations who said, "Oh, we have this problem with technical problem. I can't do." And at one point, I remember there was this meeting where we were all there, the consultants. There was nobody, none of the leaders of the company was there in the meeting. And we looked at each other, we said, "What are we doing here?" Okay, so the kind of thing that the program approach enabled us to see is look at the big picture and say, okay, you have asked me to design a governance system, so let's focus on what is the use of the meeting? What are we trying to achieve? So we divided the group into 6 areas. One was projects, one was customer relationship, one was management, okay? One was security, and the other one I can't remember. But anyway, and we said, okay, we just need 2 or 3 people in each of these meetings. What we did, though, we created overlaps. One person was always attending 2 meetings because they needed to be interfaces and overlaps. So, like in thesis example, the first meeting, everybody was there. The meeting was open. We said, the only people that need to be here mandatorily are these people, but the rest you can come. We're publishing the agenda for everybody because people were afraid we were going to talk about things that interested them behind their back, right? So basically we published the agenda, we said everybody's invited. The first meeting, everybody was there. Within 3 meetings, only the people that were concerned were there. And if you had an issue that you thought needed to be discussed in security, and you were from, for example, customer relationship, then you could attend the meeting. There was no problem. And it became much more efficient, much more agile. Then they could move much quicker. They could make decisions much quicker. They didn't have to have 8, 10 people to make every decision. And then the other thing that we did, we created user groups. We created change agent groups, where in fact we met with the people who were going to be the recipients of the change on a regular basis. That was created and headed by the HR person. Yeah, HR was one that I'd forgotten. The HR person, and we had these regular meetings every week where these people were bringing up issues. What are my issues? What are the things? One of the things we did, for example, we called that the project-based organization. And then somebody from operations said, this is a problem. Because we at operations feel you project managers are taking over, are trying to take over the department. And I said, well, that's not the case, you know, that's not. He said, no, Michel, I know, we discussed, we know it's not that, but that's the perception we have. And then I had this kind of flash. I said, what if we change the name of the program? And he said, to what? I said, you tell me. Well, he said, you're always talking about value and all that. Why don't we call it value-based organization? I said, okay. So I went to see the managing director, asked him, could we change the name of the program? And she said, yes. And we changed the name of the program, and from that moment, we had much, much less resistance from people from operations because they didn't feel that it was the project managers trying to take over, but together we were building value. Okay? So these are simple things that you can do to become more agile. The program was creating this agility, this capability to move around. Another thing we did, we were tasked with developing a portfolio management system. And at one point, I asked the question, as we were working together, the team that was developing that, I said, is there already a portfolio management system in the company? And the answer was clearly, no. And I said, you sure? Yeah, absolutely. Well, how are the other projects in the other departments run? There must be someone making decisions. When they allocate budget every year, who allocates the budgets? I said, the finance department. I said, okay, let me go see them. So I went to see the finance department and said, you know, how are you allocating budgets, and etc. Well, we create a portfolio. And I said, portfolio? Are you working on developing a portfolio management methodology? They said, well, we're thinking about it seriously because it's something that needs to be done. I said, well, we're doing it in the technology operations department. Would you like us to work together? Oh, absolutely, this would be great, you know. And what? They provided us with additional resources. They gave us 2 people, very competent people from top management, and instead of creating this little portfolio management system in technology operations, 500 people, we were now catapulted at the top of the organization, creating a portfolio management system for the whole organization of 15,000 people. So by being agile, by being open to new ideas, by looking at results and asking questions, okay, you can create much more agile organizations. And that's one thing that the program helped us to do, because we looked at the bigger picture, the helicopter view, instead of being focused only on delivering results. We looked at what is best for the whole organization.